I'm getting ready to record. Hi, this is Leora Alderson and
Coleman Alderson
with Gardens All here today again for our part 4, a 4-part interview with Roger Lenhart of Norm's Farms. It's Elderberry Farm. Welcome, Roger.
Hi, Leora. Hi, Coleman. Thanks for having me back.
It's great, and this is where we really dive in deep to the meat of the elderberry business, profitability for anyone who is interested in considering starting, growing for profit, or adding to a farm that they might already have or a venture or endeavor that they already have. So really appreciate you coming back on in order to share some really valuable content on how basically to monetize and profitize with the elderberry business, including, the challenges as well as the benefits. So people can go back and watch the first 3 videos, but just in short, Roger and his wife Ann and daughter Erin run Norm's Farms, and it is part of the family legacy from his father Norm, who was very much into nature conservancy and preserving the land and resources, and creating a legacy for his family that not only provided for the family and helped provide, but also provided for the land. He was very much a naturalist in that regard. So you guys are definitely carrying on his legacy in a wonderful way. I'm sure he would be thrilled. Did he get a chance to see the products that you've created?
He absolutely did. In fact, we were able to share not only the naming of our business, but our original logo image was of him, standing in the field leaning on a hoe. And we used that image of him to actually create our first stab at a company logo.
Excellent. That's wonderful.
Yeah, he actually shed a little tear of joy with that one. It was very touching.
I can only imagine how wonderful you were able to do that. So we hope folks will go back and listen to any or watch any of the other videos if they want to, if they're interested in things like we touched on trust, family trust, and the kind of trust that you might set up, how that worked, the origin story of Norm's Farms, how it is you came to North Carolina from Missouri. We touched on the growing of and creating of a farm, but also the products that you sell, that you guys make, and why you've chosen some of those products. So those are the first 3 videos. So this one, let's dive into what's involved with being an elderberry farmer. And just start there. It's like if people want to make a living or a supplemental income doing elderberry farming, what's involved? I know that's a big question, just start wherever you want to.
Well, I always recommend anybody who starts any kind of business venture to do their research. That's very good advice, no matter what you're doing, and it certainly holds true to elderberry farming and farming in general. We do have a tool on our website. It's on the resources page. It's a section of our story. If you just scroll down, you'll see some resources in there, and it's actually an economic forecast decision-making tool. It was put together by the University of Missouri's Agroforestry Center, and it's all about how to calculate not only your expenses and the various different components you need to plant a crop like elderberry, but your potential return on your investment as well. That tool allows you to put input cost in there, such as your number of plants per acre, your cost per plant, if you're going to be adding irrigation, how many linear feet of irrigation, and then that can tabulate down to a cost. If you're fortunate enough to have a pasture that you're just working these elderberries in, maybe you don't need to buy a whole bunch of cover grasses for your alleys. But if you're starting from bare ground, you're going to need to think about what you're going to grow in between your elderberries as well. So this tool allows you to calculate some of those maintenance costs, irrigation costs, harvest costs, and then actually be able to come back with an idea of how much money you might be able to make growing elderberries, depending on your acreage and your expertise and your access to equipment and capital.
Excellent.
Elderberries are not for the faint of heart. They are expensive to get started in. They're going to be right up there in line with any other bramble or small fruit, like perhaps looking at blackberries, raspberries, blueberries. Your cost per acre is going to be very similar. Some of your maintenance issues with your alleys in between, what you're going to do to mulch, if that's how you're going to plan to maintain the rows themselves. All these things are very similar when you start talking about small fruits and brambles. The other big input cost that a farmer, a woman, whoever this operation has to consider is not only their expertise and how well they can farm, but what kind of equipment do they have? Are you going to be doing this as small acreage, say half an acre up to maybe 2.5? Are you going to be using a lot of walk behind equipment?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to try to do this with a riding lawnmower, or are you going to go get yourself a big tractor and get serious about it? And if those are answers that are part of the equation, then obviously, you need to start thinking bigger acreages, bigger equipment, bigger return, bigger investment. Whether or not you can do well with elderberries is really yet to be determined. There is no magic bullet that we can say, well, do this and you're going to get yield A. What I tell people, before you bet the farm, before you make a large bet, make a small bet. Start out. If you think you want to do 2 or 3 acres, maybe start out with half an acre. See how well you can do with that half an acre. Get a couple, maybe 3 different varieties, 4 different varieties. Play with them, grow them, tend them, keep them weeded, begin to harvest them, learn on a small acreage with a small investment. And if after you get some results that are favorable and you decide this is something that you think you can be successful at, now 2 things have happened. 1, you've gained experience and you've established your own nursery bed. So now when you want to grow and you want to scale up from that half an acre, say to 2.5 acres, you'll have all the plant material you'll need. You'll have the experience to know which varieties do best for you in your situation with your expertise. Then you set about replicating that. That way you've cut your input cost on the plant part of the equation to 0.
Yeah.
By saying what you mentioned about you'll have your plants, do you mean you'll be able to take cuttings and root those cuttings and be growing?
That's absolutely right, Coleman. The elderberries are very easy to replicate. Not only do they replicate easily, they also reproduce on their own. So they have a stoloniferous type of root system.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shallow root system. It spreads out laterally from the original planting in all directions. And along that root system, brand new canes, new shoots can come up off that root system. They're known as primocane. And that primocane growth can emerge from the ground as a little green shoot and literally grow about 1 inch a day. Within about 100 days, it'll be about 8 feet tall and begin to start flowering.
And how do you, this may be a little too technical, but you see it growing and then you give it some time to develop. At what point do you take it out of the ground and do you pot it up and grow it on, or do you just
Well, no, you would leave that plant in that orchard in those alleys, and then you harvest cuttings. You can harvest up to 50% of the canes it produces its first year. Each one of those canes can produce, dependent again on your expertise, the soil health and vigor, each of those canes can produce up to 6 to 10 cuttings each.
Wow.
And then do they go into containers or into?
Right, and they multiply exponentially, Coleman. So when you put that first stick in the ground, you could get 2 to 4 shoots the first year, 8 to 10 the second year, 16 to 20 the third year, 35 to 40. Literally within about 5 to 10 years, that one single cane could multiply into 100 canes.
Awesome.
And so what we're doing in the orchard is we're trying to maintain a dense hedge-like row of growth. We want to maintain that hedge row at its base of about 2 feet wide. And we want to see in the neighborhood of 50 to 75 canes in every 4 feet of row. Okay. So that translates to 4 or 5 sticks per square foot.
Mm-hmm.
75 canes.
It literally produces a hedge that's so dense you can't really walk through it. You almost have to cut, breaks in between the rows. So that's one of the reasons why you don't want to make your rows too long. Otherwise, you've got to walk all the way to the end to get in between.
Right,
Makes
right.
sense.
Let me ask, Roger, we're having a little bit of feedback on your sound. You might want to bump your volume down just 1 notch, and presuming you can still hear us, let's see if that makes a difference. Just getting
Okay, I could also just try not to talk so loud.
No, I think it's like, well, whichever works for you. Yeah. You're fine. You sound fine to us. It's working.
Yeah, I can look at this and see where my settings are, but I'm not sure how to adjust the volume on this thing.
Okay, don't worry
We're
about
good.
it. We're fine. It's people are used to all kinds of sound systems these days, so we'll be fine. It's not bad. It's just a little hint. Um, go back for a second to what you were saying. People wanted to get into it slowly and experiment to start out with half an acre, for instance. And so can you walk us through that scenario? So let's say someone has half an acre or access to half an acre of land that they can plant elderberries on. What would that look like? How many plants or how many canes, stalks, roots, rootstock,
Good
whatever?
question.
And then, yeah, and then about like how long before they might be able to begin to see some revenue from this? Like, what's the big picture? Like, what's the business in a box
Yeah.
kind of scenario there?
And when would you start all this? When would you begin?
Well, those are all great questions. Elderberry planting time to establish an orchard, the best time to do that is in the winter during the plant's dormancy. Okay. The reason that you want to do that is evaporation rates are very low. Soil moisture is relatively pretty high. Temperatures are low. So it's ideal for rooting the cuttings. The spacing on the cuttings, you want to put your alleys and your rows, you put the rows 12 feet apart. And then the cuttings, we found that the best spacing on the cuttings is 18 to 24 inches within the row. Originally, we started based on the advice of the University of Missouri's program, and the spacing they recommended was 4-foot spacing within the rows. What we found in our own orchard is with that large of a spacing, you get a lot of weeds, and in our case, a lot of trees come up in between on that 4-foot spacing. And really the best way to establish a good weed control system in your orchard is to have a good stand of elderberries. So by increasing the density to 18 to 24 inches, it allows us to put 1,000 cuttings on a half an acre. You can spread that 1,000 cuttings out over a full acre by going to a 4-foot spacing, but it'll take many more years for those cuttings to grow together to form that hedge. If you're going to go with that planting, then I recommend interplanting the next year on the centers in between. So again, you really want to fill that row in and get that hedge-like growth. Mm-hmm. Then if you think about that row of elderberries itself, we want to establish that and maintain that to be about 2 feet wide. So on 12-foot centers, that only gives us 10 feet of alley in between the rows. So now you think about your piece of equipment. If you're going to be running up and down the rows with a piece of tractor equipment, a harvest wagon, the elderberry canes tend to grow kind of in a style like that where they weep outward. Mm-hmm. So again, you got to be able to go up and down the rows, and if you put those spacings too close together, the elderberries literally will crowd themselves in the alleys, and you can't move up and down the alleys easily. We have had some farmers that have small acreage. They don't want to use a big tractor, and they're going to use their lawnmower and a little harvest wagon. And so they'll go to a 10-foot spacing. And we found even in that situation, it's even difficult to move up and down on a 10-foot spacing, even with a lawnmower. Wow. Yeah. So as far as when you're going to get some return, you can actually get flowers the very first summer after planting. So say you have a mild enough climate, you can plant in January or February. Mm-hmm. Literally that summer, these plants will grow, they'll produce flowers, and they would even produce berries. It's recommended that you do not let the elderberries produce any berries their first year. The reason being, we want to see that plant puts its energy into root development rather than developing berries. So that's the argument for pinching the flowers off. This is true for most fruits and brambles, not just elderberries. So with that in mind, the flowers are very valuable. So you can literally start to do something with the flowers your first summer. The flowers can be made into simple syrups. They can be dried and sold. They can be added into teas. You can batter fry those flowers right away. So even if you're not selling them, you can create food from them right away, right out of the gate. The other thing that you can do, Coleman, is these plants produce a green vegetative shoot that comes right off their woody stem. those things can be propagated as well. You can simply snap off the little green shoots. They can be rooted, put those in some flower pots and begin to get those rooted, and you can start selling those immediately at your farmers markets.
Wow,
To
cool.
farm stands, friends, neighbors. So the income opportunity can be immediate for you,
Wow.
depending on how resourceful you are.
That's wonderful.
However, most people are not that resourceful. They're going to just pinch the flowers off and let them fall to the ground.
Yeah.
So your first harvest, if you're looking at the elderberries for the berries they produce, is going to come in that second summer after planting. The first harvest will be small. I'll be honest, it's not going to be big. If you get a few 100 pounds off that half an acre, you'll probably be delighted. We've had some farmers get as much as 1,500 pounds their first harvest after planting off of a half an acre, but that's the exception. You know, the orchard was perfectly clean. The cover grasses were robust. They had alpaca manure in the thing. You couldn't find a weed in the orchard anywhere. They laid in irrigation, and their crop did really well for their first harvest. But that's probably the exception rather than the rule. Again, think more a few 100 pounds off of that first half acre planting. And then the next year, it could easily triple to where you could get up to that 1,500 pounds or more. Ultimately, some farmers are able to get up to as much as 10 to 12,000 pounds per acre. That's what the university was able to do in some of their trials. However, are you going to be able to do as well as the university? I kind of doubt it. They've got deep pockets. They have
volunteers,
really excellent help in the term of free interns.
Yeah.
You know, so even if you cut that yield in half, you know, 5,000-6,000 pounds to the acre is still a pretty good yield. And if you translate that over to your half an acre, you know, you could be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 pounds of elderberries.
Well, I was also intrigued, Roger, by your mention of being able to take some of the cuttings and some of the shoots and pot them up and actually have a little, you know, value-added product in terms of being able to sell the plants.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people that are interested in, you know, especially the backyard hobbyists. If you go to the farmers markets, I mean, we get, you know, $10 for 4-inch plants, you know, or a tomato plant of the same size is $3.
Mm-hmm.
So they have, you know, not only intrinsic value as a herbaceous perennial over your little annuals, they've got value for wildlife habitat. They produce an edible berry. They produce the flower. They're gorgeous in the landscape. So there's a lot of reasons why people want to buy them.
We just had.
So that's one way you can fund your own operation, you know, because we're all in this together. Elderberries for everybody, every day. The more people that are out there growing and selling elderberries, the more people are going to end up with them in their backyards.
That's right. And I mean, that's a beautiful perspective. That's one of the things that we love about the kind of business that we're able to do today. And that is so many entrepreneurs we encounter, such as yourself. It's not about competition. It's about collaboration and collaboration. And, you know, your part of your vision, I believe, includes, and we can get into this more at the end. So actually, I won't touch on that now. We'll get into that at the end. It's a good way to close. But just the concept that we need more elderberry growers so that there are more people buying elderberries within our country from people growing here, basically.
Well, that's true. And then there's another really, really wonderful benefit to growing elderberries that has absolutely no commercial value whatsoever. And that is the birds are going to eat some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they're going to eat some of those berries, and some of those seeds are going to go through the digestive tract hole, and they are going to plant elderberries for me.
Yes.
All over.
You know,
All over.
they're going to be my Johnny Appleseed. So anytime anybody's out there growing them, we're also going to be disseminating those seeds through our wildlife. And we need to repopulate our elderberry habitat. It's been mostly tilled under, you know. And so, as an example, I have elderberries that come up in my driveway right next to my garage. I didn't plant them there. And if I hadn't started growing elderberries in my yard, just because I love having them around, these chance seedlings that I start to see coming up in and around my property wouldn't be there. Right. So I know anytime a farmer is out there and they start planting elderberries, they're going to be nice and they're going to be neat in rows. But I guarantee you, we're going to start seeing lots and lots of wild elderberries coming up all around any commercial plantings or any backyard plantings. And that's very exciting to me.
Yeah.
We had somebody write in just, I think it was today, making a comment about the pollen from the flowers being a great tonic.
Well, it is. The flowers themselves are easily harvested and dried. And as you begin to work the flowers and you get the flowers off the stem, you also get a lot of beautiful yellow pollen.
Mm-hmm.
And the pollen is silky smooth. You literally get coated even all the way up to your forearms and beyond. Stuff is fine like talc. It almost feels like a lanolin on the skin because it is so fine.
Wow.
So what can you do with it? Is it used commercially in any way, or is it?
I don't know any real application for the pollen. We ended up with a lot of pollen because we used a screen on our table. We were hoping to allow all the air to flow through on the screen, and as we would process that, we just begin to see lots and lots of pollen begin to collect on the floor all around us. And again, as we're working the flowers, it begins to coat us. When we harvest in those flowers, we're actually hoping that we can capture most of the pollen with the flowers. And in fact, when you get a bag of our flowers from us, if you put it through a small screen, even like a window screen, you could literally dislodge all the pollen from that bag of flowers, probably end up with somewhere about a tablespoon of flour out of a 2-ounce bag of the flowers. It would just be all that beautiful yellow pollen.
Wow,
We like the pollen in the flowers because it makes a beautiful color syrup. It's just a beautiful golden amber color.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. So how are you using and selling flowers then?
We simply bag them up in little 2-ounce bags, and then we have a recipe using that 2 ounces to make that simple syrup, Laura. It's very simple. It's just basically a pure cane sugar, lemon zest, and water. We make a tea from the flowers. Then we dissolve the sugar into it, and we add the lemon and the lemon zest. Let that steep, and then we strain that syrup off. And just delightful. You can add that to sparkling beverages. You can sweeten teas with it. We love the elderflower sorbet that can be made from that syrup. Champagne yeast and water can be added to the syrup and bottle it to make an elderflower syrup. In Germany, they make a recipe called the Holundersekt, which is a sparkling elderflower soda. And it's more popular than either 7-Up or Sprite.
Wow. I saw that on your website. So we'll definitely link to that. Every time we talk or I go to your website, I end up getting hungry.
We want to give people ideas. We want to give people ideas how to use the elderberry. It's not just a tonic. It's not just an elixir. Yeah. It's actually something that you can incorporate into daily use, into the diet very easily.
Yeah, you have a beautiful website. So yeah, definitely. It's definitely with lots of great recipes and pictures. So we'll definitely send people there. So you said in the bag that you're selling the elderflowers, are they dried or fresh?
Yes, they're dried.
Dried. Okay. And so how do you dry them?
Again, on the website, there's some nice photographs in there. We simply built some long benches with screens in the bottom, and then we put some support racks above the tables with long strings on them. And we literally hang the flowers. We have a circulation fan. We lay them out on the table, which is a screen table, and then we hang them on the string. And then once they're dry, we literally just drag them over a sieve, which is like a wooden frame with a screen on there, and then the flowers fall through, and we collect them into a collection bin, and then they're bagged up. We check them for moisture, keep them turned, and then once we get them down to low enough moisture content, then they're placed in the little 2-ounce bags and ready to sell.
So are they? Is it just the flowers off the stem by then?
Yeah, there's there's no big stems. I mean, it's impossible to not get a few micro stems in that drying process. The real trick is the timing. The stems will retain some moisture where the flowers dry out faster. Mm-hmm. So if you can get the flowers dislodged while there's still a little bit of moisture left in the stem, then the stems will stay attached and the flowers simply fall off. So it's all about timing. It's It's a delicate balance.
Right, right. So that's about what, like a 2-ounce bag, or how many
Yeah,
ounces?
that's a 2-ounce bag.
Okay, so it's a
It's
2-ounce
2
bag,
cups. About 2 cups is what it is in that
2 cups
recipe.
of tea or soda, right?
Yeah, you can make that into tea. To make that simple syrup, it produces 2 ounces of flowers, produces 8 cups of a simple syrup. And then you would use that syrup 1 to 2 teaspoons at a time.
Like making a cola concentrate or a soda concentrate,
Yeah,
basically.
like a soda syrup. Exactly. That's exactly what it's like. If the viewers and the listeners out there are familiar with a liqueur called Saint Germain,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Saint
I know it's
Germain is an
but
elderflower based liqueur. It's a wine infused product. Our syrup is like the Saint Germain, but no alcohol.
oh, cool. We'll have
That's
to look
great.
into that.
Well, you could also use that if you have one of those soda stream things.
Absolutely. I
And
do that all the time. Even if you don't have a soda stream machine, you can buy, sparkling water,
And
boy,
use
that
it
sounds good.
yeah, and
Yeah.
use it that way. So, where do you sell your elderflowers, and for how much for the 2-ounce bag?
The elderflowers are available on our website, on our company shop. They're also available on Amazon. So if a customer out there is an Amazon Prime shopper, they can get the flowers with free shipping.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how they can buy from Amazon cheaper than they can buy it from me,
Oh,
but
yeah, it's crazy. I know. It's
Economy of
crazy.
scale, I
Yeah,
guess.
economy of
Yeah.
scale.
it
So,
is. It is.
and so for someone looking to like figure out the metrics for a business, so when the plants are in flower on half an acre, approximately how much might they garner from selling 1-ounce bags of elderflower? And would that be at the farmer's market? Would they be able to go to the local Whole Foods? What would
We retail our flowers at about $6.99 a bag on our website. They're a little more than Amazon, but with the free shipping, they work out a little less that way. As far as what you're going to get off that first summer, each plant can produce probably 1 flower head, and each flower head may produce about a half ounce of dried flowers. It's hard to say. You may only get a pound. That first year, it's not going to be big, but it will be something that you can play around with. It's something that you can do. So, are you going to make any money at it that first time around? No. This is really all about learning.
Yes.
Again, this is a small bet to find out if this is something that you like, not so much, hey, how much money am I going to make off my half an acre? Right. So with that in mind, it's not going to be a big return the first year. I'll be honest.
We're kind of getting that, don't expect big things the first year.
No, again, this is all about learning, and it's also about making your nursery. I mean, if you take the cost of the cuttings, they're around $3 each. But if you buy 1,000 lot, then the cuttings go down to $2 each. So you got an opportunity to save $1 per cutting.
Right.
And the idea is that entry, we've removed the entry by $1,000 if a person wants to do this commercially. We have yet to have a landowner buy that many. I have had a landowner with a stream revetment project where they actually got financial assistance from the NRCS, or Conservation Soil Resources.
Yeah.
There's also an article on my website about how to get financial and technical assistance for growing elderberries. So with this revetment project, she actually was able to get 65 cents per cutting. She bought 1,000 lot. The federal government gave her $650 towards the purchase of her cuttings, which was about $1,980. They were $1.98 each. So she saved 65 cents each.
Wow.
By using these elderberries in what was the stream bank revetment project to help hold the shoreline in place. Elderberries are very well known for their erosion control and their soil holding capacity.
Do you know?
And so our soil conservation actually recognizes them for that.
Offhand, do you know
But that's not everybody.
Yeah.
Would you know, Roger, if they're being used on reclamation projects such as post-mining reclamation, that sort of thing?
Well, again, I keep going back to the University of Missouri and their agroforestry department. They did a lot of research about that. One of the things that they were really concerned about was nitrates in the water table, from the commercial high nitrogen fertilizers. How can we stop that? How can we eliminate that? How can we reduce that? And so what they were looking at is using a drainage swale at the low end of every agricultural field. What can we plant in that swale? We looked at plants like willow. We looked at sea buckthorn, raspberry, various different plants that could potentially be grown in those swales. And what they found out of the 4 or 5 different plants that they looked at, that elderberry was the very best choice, not only for holding the soil for erosion control. They found that it actually trapped up to 98% of the nitrates.
Wow.
That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So in our earlier interview, you said that you guys figured and discovered that you were better at creating products than and selling the plants to others than necessarily farming the elderberry yourself. Could you elaborate on that? It sounds like it's really, sorry?
Yes, I can.
It sounds like it's really easy to grow. So it'd be interesting. I mean, you made that choice for a reason, obviously, so it'd be very helpful for people to understand that.
Well, it is. And if I actually lived on my farm, I could probably do a lot better job of doing both the product business and the farm.
Yeah.
My farm is in Missouri. It's approximately 1,000 miles away from my North Carolina residence. And it's very hard to manage a farm well from 1,000 miles away. Mm-hmm. And what I found, even through a farming partner and hiring a full-time farm manager, that I wasn't very good at farming, not under those situations.
Right.
But the product business, on the other hand, I am very good at developing new clients, new products, recipes, marketing, finding resellers, strategic partners that want to use elderberry in their own value-added business. I'm really, really good at that.
Yeah, in fact, you're sorry to interrupt, but that just reminds me, you've recently got some new distribution in some major stores. So just go ahead and plug it and say where it is.
Well, we have. I mean, we're in the Whole Food stores, which is not an easy hurdle. A tough row to hoe. They've got some very, very stringent guidelines on what they expect of their vendors. They require, outside third-party audits. It's not just good enough that you're audited by the FDA. You have to go through their own process in order to be able to be vetted and to get into, the stores within an entire region. It's one thing to just get in one Whole Food store. It's another thing to go into, a whole region. They have many regions throughout the country, and we are beginning to expand into some of the other regions here pretty quick too. Kroger Mid-Atlantic has given us the green light, and they want to bring us into the Mid-Atlantic stores. We have a distributor in the New England Mid-Atlantic area called Garden Spot, and they've got about 800 stores under their account.
Woohoo, that's fantastic.
So we're starting to make inroads in there. They're literally adding anywhere from 10 to 12 stores every month for me that I don't have to go out and find or get the product to. So we're starting to see, expansion in that regard. Initially, in the very beginning, I had to reach out to every store, set up an appointment, show up for the appointment, do the sampling, do the demos, make sure that everybody had what they needed. And that's the way we added stores. Now, stores are literally calling us up saying, hey, what do we have to do to establish a wholesale account? We want to sell your product. Yeah. And so stores are now beginning to find us. And that's a really wonderful thing.
It's a lot like growing and farming, isn't it? I mean.
Well, it is. It's like there's planting and there's farming.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
in the beginning, you do a lot of planting,
Yeah.
And again, I use that same analogy on this scenario of a commercial grower making a small bet. When you plant that first half an acre, really what you're doing is planting the seed for further development. You're also planting the seed that you're going to grow with those elderberries. There's a lot to learn about growing elderberries. It's not like you can pick up a book on blueberries. You can find lots of great information out there if you want to be a blueberry farmer. But on the other hand, if you decide you want to start doing something like elderberries, there's not as much information. You're going to have to look a lot harder, and you're going to have to do a lot of this stuff on your own.
So do you have a book planned?
People ask me that all the time. I might be able to dictate a book, but I'm not a good writer.
Totally. People do this all the time. They talk your book, basically. You talk your book into a recorder when you're driving around or whatever it is, and then turn it over to a writer. Absolutely. It's possible. But yeah.
That'd be the only way I could do it.
Yeah. Well, between you guys, between what we publish on Gardens All, and, hopefully that'll be a really great source of information. But I mean, it's a good point that it's really easy to find lots of things on blueberries, but not so much in elderberry. So that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a growing venture too. And like you say, elderberries for everybody.
Every day.
Every day. That would make a great title.
Yeah, there you go.
Everybody's kind of got their tagline. Nike is just do it. We kind of came up with that in some of the early planning stages before we even had any stores selling our product for us. We had a mock-up of a product with a paper label that we printed on our computer and started taking some business courses and see if this is something that's going to have legs on it. And
absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So were you gonna?
I had one quick question. Do you all ever make use of any high tunnels, like a big coal frame or anything where you might be growing on, or do you know anybody that does that?
I think that the high tunnel houses would be a great propagation aid. As far as trying to grow out your elderberries that way, it's just really not necessary. I think it's going to add a layer of complexity and cost that's just not really needed for the elderberry. Again, it's one thing if you're going to try to grow a tropical fruit like a tomato in a temperate zone, or, high tunnel houses are great, but you're talking about a North American native perennial. This plant can literally take just about anything North America can dish out. It's one tough son of a gun, Coleman.
And so
it doesn't need the protection,
So is that across the continent? Is that throughout North America, US, and Canada?
That's true. Central America, South America. The plant literally has a global presence. It grows on 6 of our 7 continents. The only place we don't see the elderberry is in Antarctica.
Wow. Wow. That's quite a statement.
Yeah. So it's a tough plant, in North America, it's evolved with our large grazing animals, and that's how we can, cut it to the ground and it'll come back up. Now you can cut it to the ground in the winter and not ever have to worry about it. If you start mowing it down to the ground repeatedly in the summer months, eventually, you will even kill it then. But the elderberry has literally been grazed to the ground by many of our large grazing animals on this continent. And, you have to remember, we used to have the woolly mammoth, the mastodon, and the Columbia elephant. These are big, voracious eaters. And we've got the caribou and the elk and the whitetail and the pronghorn and the buffalo. I mean, the bison was a huge herbivore that grazed heavily, of all the plant species. The bison had over 500 different species of plants it would graze on.
Wow.
So again, this is a tough plant. Yes, the high tunnel houses are going to help with humidity control. And if you're going to try to propagate and you're really trying to look to accelerate that propagation effort, then yeah, these kind of aids are going to be very helpful. But are they really necessary? No. You can literally take a cutting, Coleman, jab it in the ground with no roots on it during its dormancy, as long as the ground's thawed out enough to get it in the ground. And we're talking January here in North Carolina. Back in the Midwest, you can even have thaws in the Midwest in February where you can stick a cutting in the ground. These guys are going to root. They're going to grow roots on their own with nothing in there. And the reason they do that is because they've adapted to what's known as layering. That's part of the way they propagate. They got these long canes. One of them falls to the ground. It touches the ground. And all of a sudden, it starts growing roots right there where it touches the ground. It's known as walking. We see that a lot with raspberries and blackberries, right? But elderberries can also do that. You can literally take a long cane, 6-8 foot long cane of elderberry, make a trench, about a 2-inch deep trench, lay that cutting lengthwise in that 2-inch trench, cover it over with soil, and everywhere there's a pair of leaf nodes, plants will literally come up along the length of that entire cane.
Wow.
That's how easy they are to propagate.
Wow.
Wonderful. That's great to know. You mentioned
that is cool. That's
yeah,
awesome.
Very cool.
Totally.
You mentioned that there's only one person that that has bought from you guys so far, like the large quantity of elderberry. So do you know any people who are partial or exclusive elderberry farmers now and how they're doing business-wise?
We buy a lot of our berries from a group out of the Midwest, Innovative Natural Solutions. We've got a recent blog post that we just put on our website celebrating our partners. They not only have their own plantings, but they coordinate with some other growers right in the area so that they have central collection areas and they can share in cold storage.
Right.
And then that way we've got the quantities we need in one location where we pick up from one location, put everything on a freezer transport truck and be able to get it out into North Carolina into our cold storage facilities.
Right. Nice. Okay. And so, but in terms of, so do you have any sense of the profitability of, I don't know, like, I guess that group of your partners range from, smaller, like a couple acres to, I don't know, dozens of acres perhaps. But what would be good is just to have I keep coming back to this mainly just because people are trying to figure out what they're going to do for their retirement as supplemental or exclusive income. There are many people in the Gardens-All community who are really interested in leaving the 9 to 5, and seeing if they can make a living, make a go of making a living homesteading their farm, their half-acre lot or whatever. So we just want to kind of like ballpark. I mean, I know you don't, and I know there's no guarantees, and that it'd be like going, I realize it's like going to a contractor and say, how much is it going to be to build me a house? And it really varies. It depends on your size of your house, your specifications, where the house is going to be. We get that, but just to have a range for people to have, to wrap their heads around would be really helpful if you have any numbers.
Or even
I absolutely can give you some good ideas on that.
Yeah.
So say you got your act together, you're a good farmer, you can grow these berries, we can get them harvested, you've met the quality assurance standards that we have, and now you've got a product that's commodity ready, it's palletized, we can pick that up at your loading dock with our truck. So the way we work it is we offer that price at the beginning of the season. Currently, our going price is $2 per pound. And we will contract with you. We'll put the money in escrow or we'll sign a contract with you stating that we'll buy those berries at that dollar amount. As far as the amount, we don't know what you're going to harvest yet. We'll try to guesstimate based on your acreage. Say you've got 2 acres, you think you can do 3,000 pounds the acre, you're going to have 6. We may put a cap on 5. We're going to buy maybe 5 of that 6,000 pounds from you at $2 a pound. So that's going to be your gross, right?
Right.
Profit. You asked, well, what kind of profit can a guy make? That's a pretty tough question. You've got your capital expenses. You bought your plants in the beginning. You're going to have to buy some irrigation stuff. Very well in that first 2, 3, 4 years, there may not be any profit, Leora. I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. There's expenses. There's expenses to growing these things. And that's why I try to encourage somebody to start out small and make their own nursery, because if you can eliminate the $2,000 cost per half acre, $4,000 per acre of your plant cost, then that's going to translate to quicker profit for you.
Right.
If you didn't have to invest in that plant cost, obviously the money you make when you sell your berries is going to come back to you because you're not having to recover that cost. Right. If your equipment is already paid for, or you're going to have to buy equipment. Mm-hmm. So depending, are you going to be paying yourself a salary? You can rapidly eat up all what could be profit by paying yourself too much, spending too much on equipment. So I'm very, very leery to define this in terms of profit.
Sure.
And again, this is based on that $2 per pound. So here's what I do. I buy berries for $2 a pound. If somebody wants to buy berries from me, I sell them for more than that. And when I sell them for someone who wants to then in turn maybe sell elderberries or make something with those elderberries, I get $6 a pound, and I won't sell them in less than 100-pound lots. And the reason I do that is because I've got them palletized in a commodity state that I can broker as a full pallet to somebody. If I break that pallet and I take 100 pounds off, I can't sell that pallet anymore. Mm-hmm. That pallet is done as a commodity. It's now my property. I've got to make product from that. Mm-hmm. So that's why I sell those for $6 a pound.
Sure.
And the guy who bought that 100 pounds, he's either going to make wine from that, they're going to make jellies, they're going to make jams, they're going to make syrups, whatever they're going to make. Or in the case of one person I have, he's a restaurateur supplier. He's a mycologist, and he has lots of different things he does in his woods to produce things like shiitakes and oyster mushrooms, things like that he sells to restaurants. He then in turn takes these elderberries from me. He divides them up into smaller quantities of 3 to 5 pounds each. He and then turns and he sells these for $10 to $12 per pound.
To the restaurant.
So $2 a pound, $6 a pound, $12 a pound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the answer to that profitability question is going to be determined by you, the grower, not by me.
Sure. Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And what you do with it, and how good you are at marketing yourself, how good you are at finding somebody to buy these berries that I don't buy from you.
Right.
I mean, obviously I want to buy berries that meet strict quality control standards. We want the ripest, plumpest, juicier berries. We don't want a lot of sticks and stems in there, and we certainly don't want any insects, and we don't want berries that have begun to ferment already, because I can't use those in my product. So if those quality control standards are met, then I would love to buy berries from you, again, at that, what we call a farm gate price. The reason that's important, farmers need to know what they're going to get for that crop so that they can plan accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
I would never do to a farmer what my original buyer did to me. We mentioned this before. We were growing elderberries to sell to a winery. He promised a farm gate price, and at the time of the harvest, when we wanted to deliver the berries to us, that price had been reduced by 40%.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would never do that to anyone.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it makes sense that basically the growers set the price. You set it at the price at the beginning of the season, like you said. And, it's.
Well, you do, and that's the beauty of this crop too. Elderberry is wonderful in that elderberry farmers can become more of what we call price makers instead of price takers.
Right.
If you go out there and you grow something like blueberries, that's going to be really predetermined by the market. You're not going to be able to find the value-added niches for that because everybody's doing it.
Right.
Right now, there's more demand for North American elderberries than we have growers. And that's where you want to be. If you're going to get in on a crop,
Bingo.
you want to get in on that blue ocean opportunity when things are on the way up, rather than wait until everybody's there and then you ride the wave that everybody else is on.
Right.
Again, the more that's grown, then the price ultimately should come down. I don't see it going down anytime soon. I really don't.
Right, because the other part is, so what you said is that there's more demand than there are North American growers for elderberries, and that's
right.
significant. But and while growers are increasing thanks to efforts like yours, and Gardens All too, for bringing it to the public attention, the demand is also increasing. There are more and more, and what's been wonderful seeing in the Gardens All community, we have been running the article about you and the 3 previous interviews that we did, as well as a couple other articles that we have on elderberry, and they've been our most popular articles. And what's wonderful, what's wonderful is that so many people talk about childhood memories and how the elderberry brings back childhood memories of oftentimes their grandparents and things that their grandparents would make.
Oh, I know. That's one of the favorite things. I love getting out of the building and doing demos and our different marketing events we do. We do a lot of events that involve music. Like the Hop and John Fiddlers Convention. We were there over the weekend as a sponsor and a vendor. We'll be at the IBMA next weekend, International Bluegrass Music Awards, and also the Carolina Jubilee. We're kind of splitting up and dividing. We do the Merle Watson Festival. And so we get to combine our love of elderberry with music. And every time we're out there doing these events, just like you said, Leora, people share stories with us about, Aunt Bessie and the tonic she made when they were little kids, or Uncle Joe would send them out picking elderberries because he was going to make wine, or, it's just, and the other thing that happens too is I get people a lot of time tell me that they've never had elderberry before.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to try it. And the first time they taste that elderberry extract, they're like, I've had that before.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that Aunt Sally used to give me that when I was a little tyke. I mean, it's amazing how those tastes can spark memories that are so far recessed that the person doesn't even know they're there.
Yeah.
And we love that. We just think that's the coolest thing. People oftentimes will stop at the demo table and they will literally hang out for 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes. It's really fun.
It's wonderful, and it's wonderful that you love that interaction as well, because it just makes it all work, right?
Well, we feel like a big part of our job is to help educate people, because it's this ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
We've lost so much of our ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
And so there's an opportunity for me not only to share, my love of this plant, but I also get to talk to people about perennial agriculture and the value of permacultures in the landscape, and how important it is that we have a healthy, population of wildlife and pollinators. It's not just enough to grow food.
Right.
We need to think about the whole ecosystem. And so I get to use this as a platform. The world is my stage, if you will.
Definitely. Well, you do a good job of it. So one of the things that you mentioned is basically elderberry. You could harvest flowers from it the first year, and you can begin to take shoots from it. So to get shoots, if you do more pruning, for instance, does that help stimulate more shoots? So if you want to, get your own inventory of seedlings going sooner, that you would just basically prune the ones that you have once they're like flourishing enough, a couple years old, a year or two?
Yeah, well, again, you can begin to take a few of the little green tip growth off the canes, pretty quick.
Right.
And begin to propagate those. They'll actually root out in a glass of water, as long as you keep the water fresh and clean. If you see the water begin to, turn green and begin to get a little rancid, then that will inhibit, any cutting's ability to root, whether that, be a coleus or an impatient from your flower garden.
Yeah.
Most of these plants will root in water as well.
That's a good point.
So, you can do a few of that. The further we move into summer months, the hotter it is, the drier it is, the evaporation rate increases. Things become much more difficult to propagate the hotter it is and the higher the evaporation rate is. So your timing on that is going to be, spring.
Yeah.
To try to do a little bit of plant growth. It may be that you don't quite get them rooted well enough to sell them that spring, in which case you got to winter them over, and maybe you're going to sell those plants the next spring. Maybe you're going to propagate those for your own future plantings. Again, the whole idea is learn these plants, learn their habits, figure out if it's something that you love to play with or not. And if the answer comes back, yes, I love playing with these plants, then you've probably found, a niche that could potentially help diversify something that you already do, add a little bit of supplement income to what your retirement package is. Maybe you just try and earn a little bit of extra money to spend on your grandchildren,
Yeah.
But this is a great way to do it, and if your intent is clear and you're not in a big rush, then perennial and permanent agriculture is a great way to go.
Thanks.
Most farmers in the vegetable world, they're thinking annuals.
Yeah.
A little bit of seed goes a long way.
Yeah.
And you plant out these things, you get a robust harvest each and every year. You can tally it up pretty quick and pretty easy and know what that yield is. With perennial agriculture, it's for the long term.
Yeah.
These plants are going to live 25 to 50 years. So if you're at the age I am and you're starting to think about elderberries, you're literally already thinking about potentially planting for your children.
Yeah. Excellent.
At least that's my recommendation.
Yeah, excellent. And there's so much more we could get into relative to the harvesting of the berries and drying them to harvesting, but let's just touch for now on, you talked about your requirements. What was the term you used? Your requirements for the berries that you buy, that they're
We have what we call strict quality control standards.
Right. So yeah, no, but there was another term you used, like premium or premier or something. I forget what term, but at any rate, for your growers, what is it that's kind of required to get berries ready for you? It's like you
That's a good question, Leora. When you harvest the berries, they grow in, and I'll just kind of hold my hand up. They grow in kind of what's like a wrist, and when we cut them here at the wrist. The flowers and the berries are all up here at the top. So we literally harvest that whole cluster. It's known as a cyme. That's like an umbel. So we harvest that whole thing. That goes into a collection bin that's on the front of us. We basically use a big flower pot, about a 25-gallon flower pot. It's the perfect size for a kitchen garbage can. And then we bend the canes down and snip them and let them fall in. When the berries are ripe on the clusters, they do have a little tendency to shatter. And so rather than reach out and snip, you'll lose some berries that fall. So by moving that cane over your harvest basket with one hand, snipping with the other hand, letting it fall, any of the berries that may become dislodged in that clipping process fall into your collection bin.
Okay.
Take those bags when they're full, lay them in the rows, keep working the row, and then when we get to the end of the row and we're done, then we walk back the row and pick up all the bags, put them at the harvest wagon where the tractor's sitting. And then when we've got a full wagon, we go back to the barn for processing. The berries go through a triple rinse. First thing we do is we have a machine that shakes the berries rapidly, then they fall through a screen into a collection bin, then they go through a triple rinse. And in that first bin, they're submerged into the rinse bin. We take a screen as a sieve and we can screen off all the green berries, the red berries, any unripe berries, insects and microstems. Those guys all float up to the top.
Nice.
And with the screen, we can skim off any of the unwanted stuff. That bath tends to turn very, very dark purple, almost black.
Yeah.
Right away. Then we move that bin to the next rinse bin. We submerge that in there, and then we do another skim to get anything that we missed off the first skim. That way we're able to get almost everything off in the first two water baths. The third bath is simply a check. There's almost nothing skims off of it. So the first rinse, the water turns black rapidly. The middle bin is more of a blue, and then the very final bin is kind of a light pink, almost a very pale lavender color. And then once we've done that several times, then the sinks are all drained. They're all filled back up with fresh water. We repeat that thing. Once the berries come out of that bin, we've now got rid of all microstems, all red berries, any ruptured or unripe berries, green berries that all float up to the top. And what we're ultimately looking for out of 100 berries, which will fit in the palm of your hand, we want to see no less than 2 to 3% culls. So that would be green or red berries. So literally in the palm of your hand, you don't want to see more than 2 or 3 red or green berries. So that's our quality control. Those berries then in that bin is allowed to drip dry so that it stops dripping. And then from there, they go on to a scale where they're actually weighed out into a commodity grade container. And that would either be a square stackable pail with a tight fitting lid, so that they can then get moved into a pallet situation, and then the pallet can then be forklifted and moved into cold storage. So the idea being that when we pick in the first 3.5 to 4 hours of the day. The next segment of the day, the heat of the day, if you will, we're in the barn, the fans are going, the water's running, because we're doing this in July and August. It's hot.
Right.
And so if you can be in the shade of the building with water and with fan, it's completely bearable. It's not bad at all. Mm-hmm. In fact, people can't wait to get back to the barn. By 11 o'clock or noon, you're pretty darn hot from being out in the field all day.
Yeah.
And so that's the process. And if a grower can meet those, what we call strict quality control standards, then we absolutely would love to buy the berries from them.
Question on the equipment you mentioned. Is this something that as a grower you kind of build yourself as a or is it are these strainers and skimmers something that is available out on the market?
You know, they probably are, but rather than spend a bunch of time looking for them, I just built my own, sieves and bins myself out of, food grade plastic and, stainless steel screws and stainless steel spring, and literally put together my own system to try to figure all this stuff out. I did have the advantage of being able to visit some blueberry processing stuff to see how they did it. Now, obviously, these guys have mega millions of dollars in very fancy automated equipment, but they are also using water bath to float off all the unwanted stuff too. Yeah, they're much more sophisticated in it. We're trying to do things, the old-fashioned way and try it, build it. If it doesn't work, use it till it breaks, figure out why it broke, and then improve it.
It's not
like you can go to the store and buy elderberry harvesting equipment. It's just
right.
Do you have any schematics? I mean, I'm just thinking of person that's just trying to get in the business, and they kind of know how to do stuff, but they're tired of doing it by hand. They're looking to mechanize.
Well, we're working with that. I would mentioned our partners in the Midwest, and they're actually looking to figure out how to mechanize the harvest process as well as automate some of that hand, water bath transfer sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They seem to be on the right track.
Yeah, it sounds good. Well,
We're also working here in North Carolina with some of the blueberry growers in down east, Barnhill Blueberries and Blue Jay Blueberry Farm. They've got some pretty amazing equipment for processing blueberries, and we believe with some modifications, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. That literally with some of this blueberry stuff, which is a large berry, we decrease the spacing, so instead of letting a big berry fall through, we basically have smaller screens, smaller spacings on everything, so we can move a smaller berry or let a smaller berry fall through. We can use optical sensors the same way they do, and we use Airstream to blow the unwetted berries out. This can all be done. It's going to take time, but there's some really smart people here in this state, especially at NC State with our process agricultural engineering folks there. I think we can make a go of it and get some of this stuff automated, expedite, the handling and the processing for farmers to be able to create some hubs. Right now we've got a big hub in the Midwest. Right now here in the East, we don't really have any hubs set up yet. We've just got lots of small individual growers. And so this is an opportunity for us to all organize and, again, to cooperate and collaborate. I really believe in what I call open source farming.
Yes, no, I love that. Yeah,
coding. But, we're really here to share and to cooperate and collaborate. And I think if we do that, the high tide rises all boats.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we love about the Gardens All community, hanging out with online, a bunch of gardeners, growers, farmers, etc. It tends to be a very giving, sharing, generous group. And I think that comes from when you're in the garden, you recognize nature's abundance. You recognize that nature just wants to grow and give, basically. And yeah, sure, there are times when certain plants give us a hard time, but it's all part of the cycle. Overall, it's abundance.
It is. And I think that's the beauty of, like you said, with what you guys are doing with your Gardens All site, but just the whole, concept of, seed to food. If we can share the miracle of the seed with our children and they get to plant that seed and watch it grow, and then literally be able to celebrate in the bounty of that harvest, then we've shared that miracle of life with them.
Absolutely.
Rather than they just, pick up a chicken McNugget and eat it. It doesn't make a lot of sense, in the world of what we need to do for our planet.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Well, we've been keeping you for a while. So I had one last question. Did you have another one before we wrap it up?
Well, just, what is your favorite aspect of this business, Roger? Or is that a question that?
That's a very, very easy question to answer, Coleman. It's my passion. I get to get up each and every day and play as hard as I can at what I love. And that's what rocks my world. I get to share my story with wonderful folks like you, who then in turn share that with your circle. And, it's my passion. Like I said, I get up and play as hard as I can every day.
Sounds like us. It sounds a lot like us. So back to, actually, there's one other thing we need to pick up that we talked about offline a few minutes before we got on and started recording. And that is one of the previous interviews, you mentioned that really the need for cross-pollinators is a myth because there's plenty available in nature, if I understood correctly what you said then, to pollinate the elderberry bushes. Could you just elaborate on that briefly?
Well, there is a lot of native populations of elderberries, and so you're going to get, pollen from those plants. But if you think about what they did at the University of Missouri to reach out to farmers and growers to look at these different, what we call cultivars, they're wild selected varieties. So cultivar, I don't even know if it's a real word or not, but it's one that I've been using for decades.
It is.
And so they're wild selected of the North American native Sambucus canadensis. So a Bob Gordon and a Wildwood and a Adams and a York, they're all Sambucus canadensis. So for me to say that you need an Adams to pollinate a York would be like me saying, well, you need a Sambucus canadensis to pollinate a Sambucus canadensis.
I see.
They're all of the same genus species.
Okay.
They're not different, right?
So if you had
They're all
two
the
Yorks,
same.
so
They
you-
have specific traits, and we grow these because of the traits, and we keep those traits true to their parentage through vegetative propagation.
Okay.
So that's why I say it's a myth. Anybody who says you need another variety to pollinate, you know, if you've got a wildwood, it won't pollinate unless you get some other variety, seems very silly to me.
It's not true. So
Based on the fact that they're all the same. They're Sambucus canadensis, native North American elderberries.
So will the wildwood pollinate itself?
Yes.
Plant.
Yes.
Okay. That
They absolutely will.
answers that.
okay.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if you have just one elderberry bush, it should bear flowers and fruits.
Yes.
Okay.
Completely in isolation of any other plant.
Okay.
Very
There
good.
you go. So that's
Yeah.
clear. You got that
It's
cleared up.
amazing. I mean, it's like, but again, you know, you hear this from nurserymen. There's a difference between a nurseryman and a horticulturist, right? The nurseryman is in business to sell nursery stock,
Right.
you know, and if you're only going to buy one plant from him, he's not going to make as much money as if you buy 2 or 4 plants from him. Of course, he wants you to buy different varieties. That's his job. Of course, he wants you to do that. So that's why I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. It's rife with it. And so I think that helps us sharpen our mental apparatus and skills of discernment, you know, to say,
Yeah.
wait, does that even make sense? So
It really does.
yeah.
So I hope that was a good explanation and not trying to come
Very
off, snide or anything like that. But,
No, that's,
You cleared it up.
yeah,
very
you
well.
cleared it up. And so, but to clarify, the Sambucus canadensis, so that's different than the nigra. And we talked about this in one of the earlier videos, but the canadensis is the best variety for edibility, correct?
Well, it gets down to habitat, really. The nigra is the European species of the elderberry, Sambucus being the genus. So when we talk about our North American elderberry, it is often called Sambuca nitris, and then SPP for subspecies canadensis. And you'll see either SPP or SP in parentheses in between the word nigra and canadensis. And so most horticulturists just shorten it. They don't bother saying Sambucus nigra subspecies canadensis for the North American plant. They say Sambucus canadensis.
I think so. It's all back again to it's all canadensis.
Yeah, and then the reason it's important for people here on this continent to know that they want to grow our native species is because in the trials, when the university tried to do this stuff with the nigra, they had 12, 13 different varieties of nigra that they tried to grow here, and none of them did worth a darn. Almost all of them died, with the exception of the trials they did out in Oregon at University in Corvallis. If you think about the European continent, it's much more similar to our West Coast than it is our Midwest, our southern regions, New England. I mean, these are all very different climatically than the European continent.
Yes.
The other thing is here in North America, I talk about our grazing animals. Our species of elderberry has small canes, and they come up from the base, and they don't get big and large. They don't grow large diameter trunks. In Europe, some of the elderberries, I've seen pictures of elderberries that have trunks 6, 7, 8 inches in diameter. They're growing more like a standard and more like a tree.
Yeah.
They do not grow them as a hedgerow like we do here.
Right.
So if you're a grower here and you want to try to grow some nigras, good luck. But I think you're going to be wasting a lot of time and money because A, they don't like it here, and B, they don't flourish, and C, they're much harder to replicate.
Unless you're in the Pacific Northwest.
unless you're in the Pacific Northwest. If you're around Seattle, Portland, you may find that the Niagara is a species that could do well out there. You know,
I've heard from a lot of the Gardens-All people in that area that, you know, just down the street there are a bunch of wild bushes kind of thing. I know, so I guess, yeah, I guess they are prolific there. Is the Niagara berry bigger? Like one of them has a bigger.
No, they're very similar in size. There's an article that was published about the anti-cancer properties of the European species versus the North American species. And in this study, they did mass spectrophotometry, which looks at all the peaks and valleys of the two different species. And in that, they found approximately 236 to 240 markers. And then they can lay the images of that mass spec one over the top of the other and compare the peaks and the valleys of that mass spec reading. And what they found is they're very, very similar. There's almost no difference. A few additional markers on the US, American, North American varieties than what we see in the European varieties. They don't think it has anything to do with the quality of the berry, but more has to do with how they grow.
Okay.
It has more to do with growing habit.
Yeah.
In other words, that ability to replicate through its root system, to push up, even though the plant has been completely grazed to the ground for thousands of years by all the continent's large grazing animals. It's evolved from what was the European species. They've also done studies to look at the actual origins of elderberries, and they trace all the various different species. And this was done by a young woman at the University of Missouri who did the genetic studies on them and did DNA mapping of the elderberry plants. And it's, under her opinion, she believed the plant has its origin in Ethiopia, and that the plant left Ethiopia with the salt trades, with some of the other things that came out of the Great Rift.
Interesting.
It made its way north, got into the Silk Roads. That's how it spread into Europe. Most things move, they migrate east to west, not north to south. If you think about Africa and the Congo in that region, it's all separated by the Sahara. Mm-hmm. So things don't move easily. They don't migrate easily north.
Yeah.
But with the Great Rift and the salt trades that came out of that region of Africa, that was how the coffee is from Ethiopia too, and it's worldwide now as well.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Great discovery.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
And again, I don't mean to digress. I mean, I could talk about this kind of stuff for hours.
I know, we can too, but we won't, because we want to honor your time and also the audience that is interested in pretty much the elderberry topic. So
Sure.
Yeah, so to close, but I think that, again, growers and gardeners love it all like we do, so it's okay, it's all good. To close, I was so intrigued, and we mentioned this in the previous video, but your comment previously about how about 90% of the world's elderberries are purchased by Americans from European growers, basically. Is that still correct? Did I get that?
What it is America is about 60% of the world's consumption of elderberries.
Okay.
So here in the U.S., we literally consume 60% of the harvest of elderberries.
Of the world.
Of the elderberries that Americans consume, 90% of what we consume as Americans do come either directly from Europe as a finished product, or it may be an American company that's buying elderberry concentrate from Europe. They're possibly buying berries frozen, which I've done. I've actually bought berries many years ago from both Europe. I've also bought berries from Canada. That's how important it is that we get more American growers right here, so that I don't have to go out of our borders to buy elderberries.
Exactly, which ties into my closing question for you for today, and that is, so is that, it has to do with your vision for where you see all this going, where you want it to go. And I can imagine that a large part of your legacy passed down from your father through you, because you were one of the ones to choose the elderberries, is to make it so that basically majority of the elderberries Americans are buying are grown here. So if anyone's thinking about going into it, there's just a huge opportunity, it seems. But so what is your vision for your company and the elderberries in general?
My vision for elderberries in general is that they find their way into our everyday nomenclature, the same way we've done with the cranberry and the pomegranate. Those are two great examples of fruits. Without some vision, we wouldn't have those so readily available. And so my vision for the elderberry is to make it readily available. Again, that gets to the elderberry for everybody every day.
Yeah.
The other part of your question again, if you could.
Yeah. So what is your vision for your company? You love what you do every day and growing your company. And there's so much possibility, you know, from creating new products to even potentially taking on additional crops, you know, like goji berry or whatever else. So where would you, you know, now you're looking back, you're 108 years old in your death chair, or no, in your health chair with your family, and you're talking about your life and your legacy. What do you want to be talking about?
Well, we started this company with the idea that we could make some, you know, value-added products from our elderberries on our farm. And as we, you know, began to play in the elderberry world, we realized more and more that this is something that the consumer really, really wants. And so we've gone from what is a very small local company to somewhat of a regional company. You know, we're available in lots of locations throughout the South. We're finally beginning to move a little bit into the mid-Atlantic and the New England. We're starting to see a little bit of progress in the Midwest. So what I see is I really would love to see the whole Norm's Farms concept spread to many, many farmers throughout many different regions of the country, to where we can literally create a national product, a brand that's recognized nationally, and one that is not only just elderberry. Right now we're based on elderberry, but I can see how we want to be able to do other good foods as well. And so we can work our presence with our resellers to introduce new product lines and new value-added opportunities for other resellers and other manufacturers. Things like perhaps bringing the elderberry into a line of pet foods, animal feed, you know, both poultry and swine feed. We know it works well, you know, to help boost the immune system of people, but it's also well documented that this works well for other mammals as well.
Well, I mean, like you said, they've been eating it for centuries.
But, you know, if we're going to introduce this in pet foods, right now, you know, we've got a few hundred acres in cultivation. We're going to need tens of thousands of acres of cultivation. And yeah, we may be able to utilize some of that waste stream, you know, after we extract the essence. You know, we got a lot of pulp and skin. Maybe we run that through an extruder to pelletize that so we can add that to animal and pet feeds. You know, but that's a huge, huge undertaking. You know, we literally can't even think about that for probably a decade.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that vision. And one of the things that we do is we have a website called Boomers Reinvented. And what I love is that we're sitting here, we're baby boomers, you're a baby boomer. And it doesn't sound to me like any of us are slowing down anytime soon. In fact, we've discovered, we're just getting started. We, you know, like, what are we going to do in the next 50 years of our life, you know, kind of thing. It's exciting. So I love to hear all that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
I concur. I think that, you know, you're only as old as you feel.
Yeah,
Right.
Definitely. Well, this has just been a wealth of information. It's been a lot of fun for us, and I hope for our audience as well. I hope for you that I know that you enjoy sharing the story. So I really appreciate your time and visiting with us today and the previous sessions as well, Roger.
Well, thank you, Leora, Coleman. I really appreciate you guys and what you're doing. And thanks so much for including me and letting me be a part of what you got going on here.
Awesome. We'll be in
Excellent.
touch.
We'll see you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.